On Wednesday morning, inside a basilica, it is said that the reform of the liturgy is firmly rooted in the tradition of the Church. On Thursday morning, in an Italian newspaper, a cardinal says that access to ancient forms can never be restricted by decree. Exactly 24 hours separate the two sentences. Two different places, two different languages, and neither mentions the other even once. Anyone who read them back to back immediately thought the same thing. Whether that thought holds up is the question this entire video hinges on. The cardinal is Robert Serra, and the interview was published yesterday in Il Giornale, conducted by journalist Nico Spontoni. The newspaper's headline already speaks volumes. But for priests, the ancient Mass is the one that helps them celebrate better. So, who is speaking? The question isn't one of politeness, because in this case, the speaker's resume is worth as much as the sentence he utters. For years, Serra led the dicastery for divine worship and the discipline of the sacraments. This is the office from which everything concerning the liturgy of the Latin Church emanates. The occasion for the interview isn't the Vatican news, and that's a detail worth keeping in mind until the end. It's the release of his new book on sacred music. So what exactly did he say? It's best to proceed as the interview progresses, one answer at a time, without sugarcoating summaries. An aversion confined to a few self-referential cultural circles, more a question of psychology than substance. This is how he answers the first question, the one about a possible hostility towards Latin and Gregorian chant within a part of the Church. Once the generation of 68 has passed, these unfounded and one-sided positions will pass with it. That is, he argues that the problem is not theological but anagraphic, and that it is precisely this attitude that diminishes the cultural stature of Latin Catholicism. Many priests testify that discovering the extraordinary form has helped them to celebrate better. It is the answer to the question of whether Benedict XVI was right in thinking that the ancient rite could influence celebrations devoid of a sense of the sacred. Serra adds a clarification that his critics usually deny. Abuses are very serious acts, but they should never be confused with the ordinary form itself, a profoundly humble and democratic instinct. This is how he defines Benedict's intention, to guarantee the widest possible access, so that over the decades, the people of God could choose for themselves which form best expressed their lived faith. But all this was interrupted by Traditionis Custodes, while the Pope Emeritus was still alive. The document is the motu proprio of 2021, with which Francis restricted the celebration of the ancient rite. Benedict died a year and a half later. And how do you judge that document? The answer lies in 9 words, chosen by a man accustomed to weighing them. It didn't seem like a wise or respectful decision to me. He doesn't dispute the validity of the act, and the distinction is anything but formal. He questions the wisdom of the person who committed it and the respect shown to those who endured it. But Benedict, meek as a lamb, allowed himself to be humbled, and in silence and prayer, he offered his suffering to God. It's the phrase that's circulating the most, and it's also the most challenging, because it uses a word that no one had yet used publicly for that passage. Access to ritual forms recognized and in use for centuries can never be artificially restricted by decree. Here, the reasoning ceases to be historical and becomes a criterion. If a rite ceased to serve the faith, it would die out by itself. But if it preserves and nourishes the faith, let us never limit it, because we would limit the preservation and spread of the faith itself. The reversal is all here. A rite is not defended for aesthetic reasons. It is defended because the proof is in the fruits, and the fruits are countable. Now the real question, the one you're probably watching this video for, are those words a response to the catechesis from the day before? Whoever answers yes brings 4 elements, and they must all be displayed because they are not made up in thin air. The first is the calendar, and it's the simplest of all. The papal text is on Wednesday morning, the interview comes out Thursday morning, and there's only one night in between. The second is that the answers fit together one by one with the passages of the CATECHESIS, as if they followed the same index. To the Pope, who recalls the precedents of the early 20th century, Sarah opposes a hierarchy that still reads the signs of 68, arriving once again late. To the Pope, who says that participation cannot be passive, Sarah counters the priests who have learned to celebrate better in the ancient rite. To the Pope, who says that a correct understanding of the Reform allows us to reject abuses, Sarah opposes the liberalization of the ancient rite as a correction of abuses. The third is the one speaking, not an external commentator, but the man who directed that dicastery and who answers about the liturgy with the authority of someone who worked within it. The fourth is in the verb tenses. Sarah speaks in the present tense of the hierarchy and what it should do now, not of a pontificate that has already ended. Sarah never mentions Leo XIV. She doesn't quote the Catechesis. She doesn't allude to a single word from that text. She never uses the verb to respond. The explicit target is a document signed by Francis 5 years ago. Discussing it doesn't mean discussing the reigning pope. And here's the detail at the beginning. It's an interview that accompanies the release of a book, so most likely agreed upon and conducted days before. What kind of week has it really been then? No one disputes the 3-day picture, because these are dated facts that can be verified one by one. On August 25th, an American Jesuit published a column in a religious news agency entitled "Why I Hate the Old Mass," written in the form of a confession. On the 26th, the papal catechesis arrives, and on the same day, the Pope receives in audience the Lutheran bishops of Norway. On the 27th, 2 texts are released in the same afternoon. The demolition signed by the liturgist we talked about yesterday, and this interview with the cardinal. At this point, one might expect such a tough cardinal to end his speech by asking for a fight. He does the exact opposite, and it's the part that almost no one is bringing up. He says that if the hierarchy can read the signs of the present time and no longer those of 1968, then a space for fraternal and peaceful dialogue can open up. Regarding the faithful who travel miles to find a mass, he says only that he admires what he calls a profound expression of love for God, and observes that the phenomenon is spreading. As a church, we cannot wage war on those who devoutly participate in the Mass just because they prefer one form to another. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment, Amen. God bless you.